Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how I made this black and gold splatter buttercream cake with a separator. But before we get to that, I want to remind you that I do have online classes now that are way more in-depth and very detail-oriented and in real time. I designed these classes to kind of take the mystery out of cake design. So if you're looking for a class to kind of slow things down and show you bit by bit and from the very beginning of a cake how to piece it together and all my little helpful hints, these might be the classes for you. And I have been asked this question a lot, so these classes are pre-recorded. But once you've purchased the classes or a class, whatever you choose to do, it's yours to watch in your time when you want to. So if you want to, you can go back and go over things. I will put a link to the classes in this video description, but if by any chance I happen to forget, it will always be in my bio on my YouTube channel. For now, let's get back to today's tutorial. All right, so we're starting with an already leveled, filled, and crumb-coated cake. A crumb coat is basically a thin layer of buttercream that you put on the cake to lock in those crumbs. But you don't need it to be thick. You just go ahead and you put your crumb coat on there, smooth it as best you can, pop it into your refrigerator for 20 minutes or your freezer for 10 minutes until it is dry to the touch where you can touch it and it's firm and it doesn't come off onto your finger. Then you can take it out and you can do your final coat as I'm applying here. I am showing you right there how I use a lot. I use a creme brulee torch on a metal, only metal, not plastic, that would not work, metal scrapers, and that definitely helps to remove bubbles. But right there I could tell that there was a bubble that was not going to work itself out. So I just kind of pop that bubble, fill it back in with some more buttercream, and then continue the smoothing process. And I like to use these smaller scrapers that are meant for clay, but I've only used them on my cakes on that top edge. And then I label the board. This is for an order. I was working that day at the bakery, so I had a lot of cakes I was dealing with. And an easy way for me to do that is to mark on the board with a Sharpie marker that I can, wash off to keep my cakes straight. Now here I'm showing you how I'm going to use, there are two ways to do this. In order to get your separator to stay, you can add a cake board on top underneath your final layer of buttercream. Now this is black buttercream. I just used black food coloring, popped it in the microwave, and melted it down so you get your intense black color. Let it chill in the refrigerator a little bit to firm back up, and then you get your intensity of color. And we finish off this buttercream just like the top tier. And then once we get it all smoothed out, we're going to pop that into the freezer as well. Now we're going to go back to that top tier. Now, I have to say I did stick it in the refrigerator instead of the freezer before I do my my gold airbrushing on top of it. Because I didn't want, you could do the freezer, but I would do it for no more than 10 minutes. 5-10 minutes, because you don't want it to have condensation and have your gold or metallic, whatever metallic you're going to airbrush. You don't even have to do metallic. You can do whatever airbrush color you want. But in this case, we're using the gold airbrush color. You don't want it to drip and have that condensation. And to make the color, I just use gold luster dust and I mix it with Everclear in that little bottle there. I like to mix it in there because I can very easily put it into my well on my airbrush without a huge mess. Now I kind of have to eyeball how much of the Everclear I'm adding to the gold dust. You want it to be a fairly thin mixture, but you also want it to be thick enough that you're not having to do a ton of coats. I think on this cake I ended up doing 2 coats of the airbrush because again, if you get too much of the airbrush color on there, it can drip as well. So it's better to do more thinner layers. And you can pop it into your refrigerator in between. You don't even have to do that. You can let it dry at room temp. It'll just take a little longer. You just kind of have to go by. You could touch an inconspicuous spot with your finger, like where you're going to place flowers or kind of in the back if you know what the front's going to be. And then that way you can let it dry at room temperature to avoid any of the condensation problems. That's kind of an easy fix too. When you're airbrushing, don't keep your airbrush in one spot too long. I kind of do a back and forth. I'll go up and down and sometimes into circular motion as well, as I'm doing right there. And we cannot forget the top of our cake. I like to kind of hold it in one spot, kind of wiggle it around, make sure you get that edge, and turn the cake underneath it. So really, the moving of the cake is done with your opposite hand. And then we have our final, I think, I just can't seem to stop. There we have our final coat of, stop, Mary, for God's sake. Stop. I should edit that out, but I can't. That's funny. So anyway, we're going to put that into the refrigerator to dry, and then we're going to move on to putting our supports in our bottom tier. Now, I kind of made a mistake, and I didn't take that out either because I wanted to show you. What I did was I put my straws in too far out. I mismeasured the width of the cake. I did not use the board because, honestly, for the final design, for the actual order, the separator was not there. I added that myself so that I could show you how to use the separator. So I'm just using the straws. You can do that too, but for security purposes, I would probably suggest putting the board. Anyway, so I discovered that I did not put the straws in the right place. And you would want to put straws underneath the board before you put that board on the bottom tier if you're going to use that as your support system, because you need something underneath it. Treat it kind of like a double barrel design, because the weight of that top tier, it's going to need some support. So either way, you're going to need those straws, but make sure if you use a smaller separator like I did, because that was only like a 3-inch or 4-inch separator, that you don't put your straws too close. So I'm just removing the outside row, and it's fine. It's absolutely fine, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to fill in those holes with a little buttercream. Yes, there's going to be a hole through the cake, but you know what? Honestly, nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to know. Only you are going to know that that happened. So just go ahead and fill in those top holes and level it out and smooth it out. Now is the splatter. I'm using the same airbrush color that I used for the top tier, but I did add just a tiny bit more luster dust to it to thicken it up just a smidge, because if I splattered it with as thin as it was, you're not really going to see the intensity of the gold. And I did it at a diagonal. You can do it whatever direction you want, but I just did it in the front just for that emphasis of the design, just to kind of make that pop. And I'm showing you here, I'm just using, you can use anything. You could put flowers in there. I just used what I had on hand. And I had some of those disco, they're like little mini ornaments. And I just put them in there, made sure that the little loops are in towards the center so you don't see them. And this is how I'm transferring. You got to be careful with the transferring of the top tier, no matter if you have gold on it or not. But specifically if you have metallic finish on it, because it's really hard to touch that up if you mess it up. So I'm going to retract what I said earlier. You are going to want to put that, I filmed this like a month or so ago. You're going to want to pop that in your freezer for like 5 minutes, because you're going to want to separate it from that board with your spatula, but you don't want the buttercream sticking to the board, so you're going to need it firmer. So go ahead and stick it in your freezer for maybe 5 minutes, just till it starts to firm up. And you can pull that bottom edge of the board away from the buttercream without pulling the buttercream off the cake. And I just added a few sprigs of artificial leaves here. If you want, you can wrap those stems with some floral tape to make it, if you feel better with food safety. And then I just added a flower that was in the corresponding color. So that's really it. This is a fairly simple cake, guys. I hope you learned something, though, and sorry about my little moment of insanity there, but that's really who I truly am. So I wanted to leave it in. So I hope you learned something, and I hope you got something from it. And don't forget to check out my classes. You can subscribe to it without purchasing a class, just to see what's offered. We'll catch you next time.